Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. In a great mood for a number of reasons. First of all, spring practice is off and running for UGA. Seems to be going pretty well. Pretty interesting stuff from Kirby Smart here over the last couple of days. That will continue on today's program there as well. I just love the candid nature with which Smart is speaking about what I believe are, at least from a statistical standpoint, two of the really big issues for Georgia. One on offense, one on defense. You can talk obviously about replacing defensive backs, all that kind of stuff, but the still big, bold commands if you want to win a national championship. Can you be explosive on offense? Can you be dynamic on defense, produce those negative plays? And Smart, at least the last couple times he's spoken, has not really ducked those as big, weighty concepts. It's been fun to hear. We'll do some of that with Smart here. Big recruiting stuff with Jeff Sintel on the way in today's show. I'm excited about March Madness getting up and running. First four last night was really a ton of fun. I didn't fall asleep watching the Michigan State-UCLA game, but nonetheless, a great night of basketball heading into a busy weekend for all of that. It's just going to be a good time. So I'm really glad you're with us. We'll have a fun show, and hopefully we'll get your weekend started off right. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I don't think I'm breaking new ground if I tell you that sometimes it appears that Kirby Smart has a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the media, and we can understand why. As I've told you before, I think one of the things that may be hard to understand if you're kind of deep within the bubble of DawgNation is just how much media there is covering UGA. I mean, we do this show, as for instance, on a daily basis. That's kind of unusual. There aren't a lot of things like that around the world, and there's just a lot of media that covers UGA, so I'm sure Kirby at times must feel a little smothered by it. And understanding that kind of, I don't want to call it an adversarial relationship necessarily, but sometimes it can be, not his favorite thing to do. And so therefore, I think Smart is really careful not to give sometimes the media the hot quote that it's looking for, the kind of easy soundbite that it's looking for, because I think Smart knows that this stuff can kind of be blown up and turned into something that's maybe a little larger than he intended for it to be. And so therefore, sometimes when people ask Smart questions that might be intended to lead him in a direction, Smart can sometimes push the brakes and all of that, and it's within his right to do so. And for the most part, it's all interesting no matter what, so who really cares? But you kind of notice that from time to time. Yet on yesterday's show, we talked about the interview that Smart had done on the SEC Network, where he did acknowledge a couple of things that were obviously true in a way that maybe sometimes he's not always been willing to do. He did talk about the continuity that exists for the Georgia offense and how that gives Georgia a chance to be miles ahead of where it was, or whatever the phrasing he used, but way ahead of where it was a year ago, and the comfort that exists when Todd Monken, his offensive coordinator, comes back year over year, and when JT Daniels is seemingly firmly entrenched as the starting quarterback. That is a pretty nice luxury for Georgia to be able to enjoy. And when Smart was interviewed by Matt Stinchcomb on the SEC Network, he didn't really duck that. He kind of took that head on, and he spoke about it in a very sensible way, and he kind of acknowledged what is obviously true. It was nice to hear. And an example of that also yesterday on the other side of the ball, when Smart was meeting with the reporters after the second Georgia spring practice. And, the question comes up, and it's important to understand what the context of the question was, because the direction that Smart goes with his answer here is pretty interesting. So Kirby was asked about something we also talked about on yesterday's show. With Azeez Ojulari gone, and Azeez having had such a great year for Georgia a year ago, and seemingly a surefire first-round pick, big production that has to be replaced, how do you do that? And one of the reporters in the press conference yesterday kind of went in the direction of, well, it probably seems likely that Nolan Smith, former five-star recruit, number one player from the class of 2019, that maybe he now will have that extra responsibility on his shoulders to do more for the upcoming season, given the fact that Ojulari is not here. Well, Smart took that answer to that question in a slightly different way and mentioned some new names in that discussion, and as I said before, very candid about what Georgia needs to do defensively, no matter who it is that's leading the way. This is really good stuff from Kirby yesterday about what happens for the defense now that Azeez Ojulari isn't here anymore. Take a listen to this.
I'm looking for everybody on the defense to improve. We have to create pass rush. We have to create havoc. We have to do those same things. I thought last year was probably one of our best years ever in terms of sack production, and Dan has done a good job making that a priority by the way he schemes the defense and the way he calls the defense. And we had productive rushers, but a lot of that was, what he called and trying to scheme to get guys one-on-one. Travon's the guy that's going to have a big year for us. And not only is he replacing Malik, but in a lot of ways he's replacing Azeez. And I think everybody just assumes with Azeez being gone that it's like Nolan's job. It's not like that for us because 60, 70% of the snaps, Travon is Azeez and Nolan is Azeez. They're just one's left and one's right. So both those guys play defensive end a lot.
So listen, I think that is really good stuff. And I think that's good stuff from Kirby Smart for two reasons. Nice window into what his thought process is, what's going on with the Georgia defense behind closed doors during spring practice. First of all, to openly acknowledge something that I believe is true, that Georgia, even in a short season last year, not playing the full 12-game regular season, Georgia from a pass rush standpoint was better, I believe, than any year under Kirby Smart here thus far. And I think Kirby's right to say, while Azeez Ojulari individually gets some credit for that, he certainly maybe, helped contribute to the win against Cincinnati in the bowl game, for instance. But it was also, I'm guessing Kirby's right about this, kind of a schematic decision by Dan Lanning to emphasize that pass rush. And all of a sudden, Georgia last year really did resemble the look of so many of these great defenses that have contributed to championships. The example that I've used before on all of this is LSU. LSU in 2019, when they won the national championship, statistically speaking, trailed Georgia in a lot of categories. But they were better at Georgia in some of the havoc rate stuff. Sacks, tackles for loss, passes broken up. That was something that LSU did better than Georgia in 2019. Georgia was far better than at limiting points. Georgia actually gave up the fewest points of anybody in the country in 2019. But LSU was better in some of the havoc categories. They were giving up yards and points when they weren't producing havoc plays, but they were getting enough negative plays and enough disruptive plays that, lo and behold, it became part of a formula towards winning a national championship. And Kirby Smart there in the beginning of that clip you just heard says, and we need to make sure we're doing that this year, not referencing LSU, but we need to make sure that we're producing those sacks, those havoc plays, those things like that. We need to make sure that we continue in 2021 what we took a big step forward in 2020, and I think it's really nice to hear Kirby Smart say that. It's also interesting on this, that when Kirby is asked about one player and he chooses that as an opportunity to talk about another player, kind of bringing up a name unsolicited, that's probably worth paying attention to. And so the question is related to Nolan Smith, but Kirby Smart says you're thinking about Nolan, but make sure you also think about Travon Walker there too. Now, obviously, this is in my wheelhouse big time because I've always been a huge fan of Travon Walker as a player. I was on the Atlanta radio station 92.9 The Game the other day, and I talked about, where those big-time, top-end, high-level performances can come from Georgia this season, and I didn't hesitate to mention defensive line. I believe that Jordan Davis, the nose guard, is probably already on the radar as a first-round pick for the upcoming NFL, I should say the next NFL draft next April. And I think guys like, Travon Walker could take a big step towards that too. I've always been a big fan of Travon, so my ears definitely perk up, and my excitement level definitely goes up when Kirby Smart starts mentioning Travon Walker as a big candidate to need and have a big year, as Smart very clearly challenges him to do right there, as a way of replacing some of the statistical success that Azeez Ojulari enjoyed last season. And here to me is a very important reminder. And I think, look, for those of us that care about Georgia football and enjoy following this, it's always true that there's another new crop of hot new names arriving on campus each and every year. So the guy from like a couple of recruiting cycles ago almost in some points becomes out of sight, out of mind, because there have been so many other big names that have kind of come to the forefront since then. Sports fans are just kind of always interested in what's new and what's next, and Travon Walker's been here for a couple of years. He's not quite what's new and what's next anymore, so it can be easy, as I said before, to kind of put him out of sight, out of mind. But think about this for a moment. You remember in like professional sports when you have like expansion teams and you have expansion drafts? Just do this exercise in your mind. Let's say we were going to create a 15th SEC team out of thin air, right? And we were going to give that team a chance to draft players off someone else's roster, the other SEC schools, to create their own roster. And let's just say, for the sake of conversation, you couldn't protect any of the players on your roster. Everyone was free to be drafted. I can promise you this. If a 15th fictitious SEC team was created out of thin air and they had a chance to draft players off other SEC teams' rosters, even though Travon Walker's been here for a couple of years and maybe some Georgia fans have kind of maybe forgotten the buzz that existed around him when he first showed up on campus, I can promise you this. If there was a chance to draft him off Georgia's roster for a fictitious 15th SEC team kind of constructed out of thin air, Travon Walker would be one of the first players off the Georgia roster to be taken. That's the level of prospect that he continues to be. And Kirby Smart saying, hey, in terms of what might happen for the pass rush this season, how do you replace Azeez Ojulari, Travon Walker being a big part of that? I think that's really interesting. It echoes something I've always believed was a possibility, and it also kind of generates even more excitement for me that it might actually be true, that the former five-star Walker, one of the big recruiting wins for Georgia in recent recruiting memory, might have a chance to have a very big season this year. That's really interesting. Now, to slightly shift gears, but sort of stay on the same subject here for a moment, something else came up yesterday regarding that pass rush, outside linebacker, front seven situation. And this is one of those things that I think can get easily misconstrued. So I want to try to walk through this just a little bit. We just talked about Travon Walker, kind of a defensive end, getting a chance to rush the passer. Nolan Smith as a little bit more of a traditional outside linebacker, getting a chance to do some of that kind of stuff too. But what about Adam Anderson? There's been some buzz out there that Anderson is doing some different things, maybe playing a little bit more of a fifth defensive back star role from time to time, maybe not all that unlike what other outside linebackers have done at Georgia, guys like Lorenzo Carter in the past, as a for instance. Smart did talk about that some yesterday too, so let me give you a chance to hear some of this, just to maybe clear up some of the confusion that's out there. First of all, here's Kirby Smart on the creative ways in which Georgia wants us to use what is, I would say, a pretty talented position group there at outside linebacker.
I wouldn't say we're looking for more creative ways. I'm saying we've already done it. So if you studied our defense really hard, there's packages where 3 outside linebackers are on the field. There's 2 outside linebackers on the field, a lot of snaps if they're the best 2 players. And then there's 1 sometimes. So, Adam is not a normal outside backer. He does a lot of different things. He's playing nickel star for us now, and he still plays outside backer some on third down. And then you got Bill, MJ's injured, and Nolan playing there. So we're growing at that position, but we're not as deep as we were. And Chaz is coming along and repping there some as well. It's a mid-year enrollee.
So that's pretty interesting. You hear Adam Anderson doing a star role, kind of a fifth defensive back. That sounds kind of wildly different to some people in the way you would expect Anderson to be used. But as Smart, I think, pretty clearly articulated yesterday, that's maybe not all that different than some of the schematic stuff they've done in the past. So maybe an important addendum to that discussion, Smart also offered that this isn't actually all that different than some of the things we've done before. A little more of Kirby Smart once again.
Basically, when you're an outside backer, you are a star. So I know that's really complicated for you guys. In a 3-4 system, you have 2 outside backers. Well, every snap we play 3-4, we have a star that is an outside backer. So Mark Webb was an outside backer last year on 50% of the snaps. Well, that's what Adam Anderson is. So if you're going to rush him 50% of the time, would you rather rush Mark Webb or Adam Anderson? So you have to build your defense around a structure of what you want to do. They both have great strengths. Their strengths are different. And we think that he can help us from a rush standpoint. What we're experimenting with right now is him having to cover, because it gives us the luxury of playing 4 DBs instead of 5, and it accentuates our lack of DB, but it accentuates our strength at rush guys if we're able to play with him. So we're challenging him, asking him to do a lot that if we had to play a game tomorrow, we wouldn't ask him to do all these things. But we're trying to teach him and have a growth mindset with him.
So maybe not all that different than some of the things that we've seen Georgia outside linebackers do in the past, but the one thing that I think is very clear and very easy to understand, that when you've got a talent like Travon Walker, we just mentioned a moment ago, when you've got a talent like Nolan Smith, who Kirby Smart also just spoke about, and obviously Adam Anderson, who we spoke about at great length, finding a way to get guys like that on the field together as much as possible, getting your best 11 guys in the mix, in the fold, that's the job of any coaching staff, and it's one of the things for those of us who are fans that makes this spring, heading into the fall, very interesting. How does Georgia use all this talent? How creative can Dan Lanning be in employing this in a way that allows Georgia to build off of what had started a year ago, becoming a much more dynamic defense, much better from a pass rush standpoint, and frankly, a lot more closely resembling some of the teams that have recently won national championships. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on Twitch as well. Podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. A lot of you using that as a way of participating in our podcast cool down immediately after the show. That's a lot of fun. We appreciate you being a part of that. And, of course, for those of you that listen to the radio there in Athens on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, we really appreciate you being a part of the show there as well. Lots of different ways to get in touch, and thankful to have you with us for all of them. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making all this possible. It's not too far away from Easter. It's a really important thing to keep in mind, and Kroger's got you covered for all of your big-time Easter needs right now. When you check out Kroger.com/Easter, you can learn more about this. All the stuff you need to fill your baskets, whether it be that little grass stuff that goes to the bottom, or the candy and the plastic eggs and everything else that goes there, or the big meal you're getting ready to prepare. Many of you vaccinated now and healthy and safe and ready to get back together with family again, and hope Easter's a great time for you to do that. Kroger.com/Easter. Learn about all of the big savings and the recipe items and everything that you can do to get ready for a great Easter coming up. Of course, Kroger going to get you well stocked and ready to go for all of that, and that's a really fun thing to think about. All right, it's Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. That's going to be really fun with him today, too. A lot of recruiting stuff to get into, including a story that dropped last night at DawgNation.com related to what we hope is, and certainly seems like it's going to be a relaxation of the recruiting restrictions that have been in place by the NCAA, which is going to allow some guys to take some visits. And it sounds like the early portion of the month of June could be well stocked with elite recruits taking potentially official visits to Georgia. Jeff had some really good reporting on that last night. We'll talk to him about that in just a moment. I also want to set the stage with this for Jeff before he joins us here there as well. Really good interview with Branson Robinson, 4-star running back out of the state of Mississippi. Robinson was on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger on Wednesday. And listen, there are a lot of recruits, especially in these modern times, that love to keep their cards close to the vest and love to do everything they can, which is their right to do so, by the way, but do everything they can to prevent you from knowing exactly what they're thinking. In Robinson's case, he doesn't seem to be all that interested in doing that, pretty boldly proclaiming how much affection he has for Georgia right now and not shying away from telling all of us why. So this is the 4-star running back Branson Robinson with Jeff Sintel from Before the Hedges on Kroger on Wednesday. If you're a UGA fan, you'll certainly like a recruit saying things like this.
Georgia is number one right now. You know, the way they produce their running backs, the way they develop their running backs, that's RBU right there. And, the great offensive line play, the great head coach. I mean, just a great all-around football school and, academic school. So Georgia is just a really good place to be.
I think there's a lot to like about Robinson as a player, and it's been kind of interesting to watch the way in which his reputation seems to be growing in our comment section. I've noticed that on Facebook, YouTube, things like that the last few days, that more and more chatter about him, more and more folks being impressed by what he's doing, on his high school game film. People seem to like him. And if you're a Georgia fan, as I said before, you'll love the things that he says about UGA, the way in which Georgia wants to sell itself as a destination for running backs because of the history and pedigree that it has, but also a great place to spend 3 or 4 years of your life, getting, good academics, getting a fun college experience. It certainly seems like that has worked on Robinson, and that is a really fun thing to be able to think about there as we go around the doghouse. All right, it is great to have you here today on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Before we are done, as I said before, we're about to roll through all the recruiting stuff with Jeff Sintel. We'll do a little bit of a preview of NCAA tournament here today. I know that's getting going. Many of you have signed up to be a part of our bracket contest there, and we are excited about that. I've got also one announcement that I can make about something really fun that's going to be happening at DawgNation today. And then I'm going to tease an announcement for something that's going to go down next week. So we'll kind of cover all of those bases here before we're done. So I hope you'll stick around with us for the full show. But for now, on everything related to UGA recruiting, on Robinson, who you just heard from, and some big visitors on tap potentially for the month of June. Let's do all of that. Jeff Sintel, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And, of course, it's great to have you with us, too.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So as we say hello to Jeff Sintel. Jeff, I assume we'd be speaking a lot about Branson Robinson on today's show, and we will. Good interview with him from Before the Hedges presented by Kroger this week on Wednesday night. That was fun. But last night, DawgNation.com, you also dropped another story, which I think is going to take precedence for us for a moment. First of all, I've been a big advocate for the opening up of the recruiting process, allowing these 2022 guys to take their visits. It seems like that could be on tap here for the month of June. And, Jeff, it stands to reason, based on your reporting from last night, that Georgia's ready to jump on that opportunity right away with a huge crop, potentially, of official visitors, maybe most prominently led by the quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. But Stockton, as good quarterbacks seem to have some coattails for himself, bringing other recruits with him for that. A lot to unpack here, is there not?
Yeah, Brandon, and good morning, everybody. I guess I want to say this. Normally a lot of us in the industry, and I mean recruiting reporters, analysts. We didn't. I guess back in the day, we didn't really get jazzed about big visitors coming to the campus, because really for a school like Georgia, and there are about 4 or 5 others in the country, it's kind of just expected. It's like, someone tailgates at Sanford Stadium. The way Georgia recruits, they're going to have big visitors come in. But then even outside the boundaries of the global pandemic, this was one that just feels different. And everybody's scheduling visits now. They're scheduling camps. They're scheduling evaluation times, because the rumors are there everywhere, basically, that there will be a quiet period at least in June. And some recruits I know have already scheduled all 5 of them for the first 5 weeks of the open dead period in June and July. But for me, Brandon, this is different, and this is even different pre-pandemic. You've got, this would rival one of the bigger recruiting weekends ever in Kirby Smart's time, when you have, it looks like Gunnar Stockton's going to be there as the front man trying to put the whole offensive band together. There's Oscar Delp, nation's #1 tight end. There's the Nylon Morissette, very likely to also join that group. Nation's #30 wide receiver, a huge target at wide receiver for Georgia. You've got Kojo Antwi, another top 100 receiver. Yeah. Brandon, we always stress that. Got to get a top 100 guys. Those are just different than maybe some of Georgia's better, number 150, 250 type receivers that they've been lucky to get over the last 4 or 5 cycles. There's just a different level of play and a different level of player between a top 150, 180 receiver and a top 100 receiver. And I think Kojo's numbers are still going to go up northward. And then you got Addison Nichols, a top 100 offensive lineman. You start adding all these guys in there. And, Brandon, that was a great recruiting weekend, a great official visit weekend for any weekend in Kirby Smart's time, much less the first one out of the gate, post-pandemic dead period.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And to me, this really kind of takes me back to something you and I talked about a lot last week when it comes to Kojo Antwi, where you understand the pull to Texas A&M because he's got family ties to the state of Texas, certainly near, or at least relatively near, the College Station campus, and yet you also could see Antwi having friendship ties to UGA. And a lot of the guys that I presume him to be friends with, based on your reporting, are guys that you just mentioned, potentially being on campus there in early June. Nylon Morissette, obviously Gunnar Stockton, Oscar Delp, the tight end. And it really kind of serves as a reminder of, he may have blood ties to Texas A&M, but he's got, friendship ties, guys that he's known on the recruiting trail and just from the high school ranks here in the state of Georgia, who are at least, if not Georgia commits, in some cases closely connected to Georgia. To me, it just serves as a reminder for what a big decision that Antwi is eventually facing.
Yeah, he's got a July the 5th decision. That's out there. Delp doesn't have a decision timeline, so to speak. I just think he wants to take a bunch of visits first. He's also got Florida and Carolina scheduled. Interesting to see that maybe a Clemson or Michigan aren't scheduled yet there for Delp. And then you've got Antwi. He's going to go to Texas A&M College Station the next week. And then you've got him going to USC the week after that. So, I think the thing here, Brandon, is you just want to sit there and, the other thing we got to mention here is Delp and Antwi. Brandon, we all had our little packs of running guys when we were in high school. Those are the guys you were usually at somebody's house, or you were playing ball together, or you were going to this thing called the mall together way back when. Those are just the guys you hang with. And the circles for Delp and Antwi intersect. They're around each other a lot. And now they're going with Gunnar, a guy that is seismic in their recruitings about how he's moved the needle for Georgia. And you've got a big, right out of the box, big gate recruiting weekend. Another name to throw into that mix is Marquise Groves-Killebrew, the senior member of the 2022 class at Georgia. He's been a teammate with a lot of those guys so far this year on Hustle Inc. He's been a teammate with Gunnar for years. He's been a teammate with a lot of guys in that cycle for years. And he's not taking his official, Brandon, but you got to like this. He knows how important that weekend is going to be with a lot of his compadres, so to speak, and he's going to be there that weekend too. So you could have 5, 6 major Georgia either commitments or targets all in town that same weekend. And Brandon, this is still 12, 14 months away. 14 weeks away, excuse me. Cross our fingers here, but there's going to be a lot more names that probably come in along with that.
So let's talk about Denylon Morissette for a little bit more here. Good story with you at DawgNation.com about him, and he's also one of these guys that could be visiting here in this June time. And, you know, it's difficult for me to figure out exactly what may be going on with Morissette. He mentioned USC fairly prominently in the story that you wrote about him. Obviously mentioned Georgia and the connection there to Gunnar Stockton. Give me a sense for kind of where you think things stand with Morissette, because you know how I am. All these guys talk about Oregon and the out west schools. None of them ever go there. The ones that do end up not being happy. So for the most part, I don't really view the West Coast contenders as all that serious. I can say that more candidly probably than you can, because you cover these guys for a living. But I never take the West Coast stuff all that seriously with some of these guys. But in the case of Morissette, I mean, how much do you think the presence of Gunnar Stockton matters here? He certainly spoke about Gunnar pretty glowingly. How important do you think that is for a guy like Morissette?
You know, Brennan, I think Denylon is a man that says what he means and means what he says. Excuse me, a young man. One of the more candid interviews you'll ever come across. He's smiling, and, you know, sometimes recruits used to look at these interviews like, okay, am I going to let these nuggets go away? Am I saying too much? Do I want to say this yet? You know, Denylon really has no filter, man. He's just going to come out there with it. He's like, man, all these things are great. These are all great opportunities. I got nothing to be happy about all these things that I've got going through my mind right now. And let me just cut to a chase here, Brandon. Most people think, and it was even evident by what he did with, he named 4 of his likely 5 officials. He parked 1 slot remaining. It was curious that he did not name Alabama as one of his 5 officials. Most in the industry have always pointed to Denylon Morissette and saying, if Alabama comes hard after Denylon Morissette, they're likely going to get to Denylon Morissette. That's why I thought one aspect of our conversation was so telling was when he said something like, you know, Alabama talks to me, but they don't talk to me as much as all these other schools are talking to me. And he's like, that's up to them. I can't control how much they want to talk to me or how hard they want to recruit me. And he's like, if they don't want to recruit me hard enough, if they don't think I'm a priority, well, then that's on them. He said he's going to be fine wherever that leads him to. So a lot of folks in the industry think if Alabama comes hard with both barrels, so to speak, with a, you know, double A gap blitz recruiting speak. Let me use more PC vernacular here in terms of rather than the old West both barrels type thing there. But that's going to be the interesting showdown there. Now Georgia has Gunnar. Georgia has a lot of affinity with a lot of guys he's known, a lot of coziness. Going to be close by. You know, Georgia doesn't need to get in a lot of shooting matches or get into a lot of contests with a test your mic contest with Alabama. As far as receivers go, I don't think that's a race they're going to win. But when Georgia's coming harder for a recruit that they're prioritizing more than Alabama, I think that would eventually bode well for Georgia in the long run.
I want to ask you more about Branson Robinson here coming up in just a moment. Let me quickly remind folks as we enjoy this time of year, don't forget, March Madness beginning today. The book is now open at Harrahis CHEROKEE Casino Resort, so your chance to get some sports gaming wagers down in the mountains of western North Carolina. Beautiful place to get away, just 2 hours away. Of course, social distance gaming floor and gourmet restaurants and world-class shopping, luxurious spa, all that kind of stuff there as well. But a fun thing to think about right now with sports gaming now open in the mountains of western North Carolina, make sure you check out Harrahis CHEROKEE Casino Resort. To learn more about this, go to Caesars.com/Harrahis-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harrahis-Cherokee, and you can learn a lot more about that. Really, really fun weekend going down there at a Harrahis, and I know you probably wish you were there, and you can certainly make plans to be there very soon, as the book is open and everybody's having a good time there at the 2 Harrahis CHEROKEE Casino Resort properties, the original, and, of course, Harrahis Cherokee Valley River there as well. So, Jeff, Branson Robinson is a guy I said before that if I look at my comment sections, I seem to see some popularity growing for this recruit amongst a lot of the folks who follow this kind of stuff closely. Impressive game film. Certainly a very impressive interview with you this past week on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, where Robinson really showed a lot of love to UGA in the midst of that discussion. Now, he also has other schools that are pursuing him here. We won't deny that. But he was pretty articulate in naming Georgia his leader there. Kind of tell me how long this has kind of been in the works here and kind of how this is going. Obviously we talked, about Emmanuel Henderson last week, Georgia being a hat on the table for a guy that I don't think anybody really thought that Georgia was going to win for. But where does Robinson factor into all this right now with what Georgia is doing from a recruiting standpoint at the running back position?
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, maybe we'll call it a postscript to the Emmanuel Henderson decision is, I was told, and then I went back and saw it, his Instagram Live, there was a lot of Georgia guys on that Instagram Live. There were several 2021 signees, other, major consideration guys that were watching that. And I don't know whether they were wanting to spam the feed and just make sure Georgia was part of the programming there, but they were watching and looking at that one really closely. But moving that one off to the side, which is I think what's going to happen. Man, Brandon, this Branson Robinson fellow, I think you're right on. You're watching your comment sections as well. I would say if we removed, obviously, Gunner and Bear, and maybe even all the commitments, but I think I see and hear and have more feedback from folks about Branson Robinson, perhaps than any other recruit, maybe outside a Delp, maybe outside an Antwi. Those guys have a lot of juice to their names a lot here recently as well, but and obviously throw Malachi Starks in there, but clearly what we just did a quick little exercise there is Branson Robinson's one of the top 5 names, I think, on most Georgia fans' minds for their recruiting class of 2022. And Brandon, this timeline here, he told me his last game of his junior season, that's when he decided Georgia was his number 1 school. And I think it's humorous, Brandon. I don't know if you felt the same way. I've known you long enough to think that I can guesstimate your reaction. I know you like to sift and filter through a lot of comments for signs, kind of like you're an 1855 Dahlonega gold mine panner.
Sure.
Or maybe you're over there in Alaska or over there in San Francisco during the Klondikes. But you like to look for signs, but it was really intriguing to hear a lot of things coming out from Branson Robinson, who he's kind of noticing his own signs. I mean, it's not quite the Georgia Power G, but it's an off-brand, non-licensed, collegiate licensing knockoff of the G. And it's not quite red and black, but it's Cardinal red and black, maybe a little bit of South Carolina or maybe that old school San Diego State Marshall Faulk type look to the colors. But you see all these things, and it's number one, everybody compares him to Nick Chubb. He also thought the great Auburn legend Brandon Jacobs was another guy. He's nicknamed he's nicknamed Zeus by a couple of his coaches. That's because he can basically squat every weight in the weight room, 700 pounds or so. He's got a 430 bench. He's got a 345 clean. These all sound like Nick Chubb numbers. I mean, I think if he adds another 50 pounds to his clean, he'll be in Nick Chubb territory there as well. And then there was another telling thing. Georgia has the biology degree. He wants to be a physical therapist. Georgia has the great offensive lines. He has the great recruiting relationship with Dell McGee. He says Dell McGee is out of all of his coaches in recruiting contacts, Georgia's Dell McGee is his best relationship. And then he says something about how he wanted to basically try to become Mr. Powerlifter, Mr. Strongest Man in the world. And he goes back to his 8th and 9th grade years, and that's when he wanted to get stronger. And he saw a documentary on SEC Network, the Herschel Walker documentary, the one about the 1,000 push-ups and the 1,000 sit-ups. And
sure.
He was inspired by it. He went from about 160 pounds in the 8th grade to 205 pounds in the 9th grade, doing those 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups. Now, I loved his honesty. He said, man, that's a lot of sit-ups. I couldn't get 1,000 sit-ups a day, but he could get 800 or so a day. And that's how he transformed his body. So that's another nugget there. Seems like there's so many here, man. But he sat there and he looked at it. When he talks about it with his teammates, they all sit there and notice the colors. There's the connection to Harrahis Walker, Nick Chubb, and it's a whole ball of gumbo, man. That he even notices his own signs about. He even said that it looked like it was maybe destined or preordained that he would eventually choose Georgia, because all these things just match up with his life right now. And Brendan, simply put, I don't know how Georgia could be in any better shape right now with Branson Robinson than they have been for the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Really good stuff all the way around. Let me just finish with this. First of all, thank you for the shout-out on one of your stories this week at DawgNation.com. And Tony Mitchell, very impressive-looking defensive back for the class of 2023. It seems like Georgia's trying to make a little bit of a move with him there, although it's a pretty crowded race, it would seem, for Mitchell here at the moment. As I said before, I certainly appreciated the shout-out there at DawgNation.com. And what do you want to tell our audience about Mitchell before we say goodbye to you here today?
Yeah, Mitchell, Thompson High School. There are 3 guys there Georgia wants. Now 4 guys Georgia wants. Jake Gaines is the recruiting coordinator. Everybody knows Jake Gaines there. But Mitchell, it might be Money Mitchell one day, baby. One day, Brandon, if all things work out for Georgia. But he's known Schumann and Kirby. He's been talking to them since the 8th or 9th grade. He thinks he knows where he wants to go. He's just going to wait it out. He's going to take some visits. He's going to see what happens with coaches, because he noted. He told me he was affected by watching a guy like Charlton Warren that he knew. Like he knew the fam, they knew his fam, and the next day he's like, when are you gonna become a dog? And then the next day he's the defensive coordinator in Indiana. So that was a kind of a grow uphill moment for him. But you know, Brent, I know you're a man of the people, and I know you're all over your social media networks. And I thought it was very interesting how Tony Mitchell, there's this thing going around that says, tell me you're, for example, a DawgNation Daily listener without saying you're a DawgNation Daily listener.
Sure.
Well, Mitchell kind of had that where he was like a way to say he's really interested and very plugged into Georgia without coming out and saying it, because we were asking, I was like, all right, man, dead period's over. What are you going to do? Which schools you got to see? And he named off everybody, I think, except Drake and University of Texas San Antonio as all the places he wants to go see. Didn't name Georgia, and I was like, well, why not Georgia there? And he's like, man, he said, I've been to Georgia so many times I could give the tour. He's like, I've seen everything. I want to go back, but now I just need to see everything else. And I know there's Alabama there, Brandon. It's got to always say Alabama here. That's the 900-foot statue in every recruiting in every recruiting story, when you're talking about a 5-star number 1 quarterback in the country out of this state of Alabama. Tuscaloosa is really only about 30 miles from Alabaster in the Birmingham kind of metro area. So, but then he said another thing, Brandon, and I guess this is probably what you wanted to hear from guys like George Pickens and Clay Webb when Georgia was able to shoehorn some of those guys out of the state. Is you had him say, he told me, he verbalized, I'm from South Florida. I didn't grow up in Bama. I've got no ties here to Bama. So if the magic act is going to happen where Georgia's going to pull a 5-star corner, the nation's number 1 corner out of Alabama, it certainly seems like there's some foundation laid for Georgia to have a really good shot at doing so.
Boy, that's good stuff, Jeff. Thanks so much for sharing this recruiting information. Really great run of guests on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger as of late, and obviously really good content there at DawgNation.com. I am so excited, and I think I speak for the audience that's tuning in today who very much feels the same way, that the month of June is going to be like old times again, with a lot of these guys getting a chance to come by and see UGA. Obviously, I'm a partisan here, and I hope that these guys choose Georgia, but I really do mean this, that more than anything, I'm just glad these guys get a chance to experience that part of the process to bolster their own decision-making ability, and so they can have something that feels a little bit more like a normal recruiting process. So I'm excited that it's heading in that direction, and I'm pretty thrilled that Georgia's deeply in the mix in all of this. So really good stuff, Jeff. Hope you're getting ready for a great weekend. I know it'll be busy on the recruiting front as well, and we will look forward to talking to you back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger again very soon.
Hey, Brandon, one quick thing. You got my mind wandering. You remember how long ago it seemed? Remember that commit to the G type sign in the marquee that showed up in early 2020 with the recruiting visits, and the thing looked like it was like 1,000 light bulbs all put together, and the guys were posing and taking their pictures in front of that?
Yeah.
Well, you never really got to see that. And now Georgia, when this happens in June, Kirby Smart's going to have things looking like your favorite, Star Wars attraction or Avatar attraction at Disneyland, where Georgia's going to find a way to revolutionize the visit and these photo shoots because the kids have been starving for them. I just can't imagine what Georgia's going to have for a lot of these guys, aside from an $80 million team headquarters, weight room, meeting facility. I think everybody's probably going to get haircuts or whatever. That's something to really look forward to. And, man, just for all of us, man, to simply write those things that, hey, big guys are scheduling visits for a great weekend at Georgia. Man, it felt good to type that once again.
Yeah, it really did, Jeff. Good stuff. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Take it easy, man.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we're going to bounce around the SEC and obviously the big news around sports, the start of the NCAA tournament. We'll do that here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I want to make an announcement. I want to tease another announcement. There's something going to happen today that I'm really excited about. This is not really the kind of thing that we've done much of before. It's going to be a little bit different kind of thing, but as a way of covering what's happening in spring and looking at some of the top players in the Georgia roster, we're going to start a brand new show today. We're going to call it DawgNation Freeze Frame. The reason we're calling that is because we're going to have really deep dive and kind of zero in on some key moments for some of the best players and talk about how they fit into the picture for Georgia in 2021. It's going to be me and our good buddy, the former Georgia All-American John Stinchcomb, serving as an analyst here. And we're just going to break all this down and have a really fun, it's going to be a shorter show, not going to be an hour long. It's just going to be kind of a quick hitting, really good stuff on video. Today we're going to actually look closely at Jordan Davis and talk about why Davis can be such a huge, valuable member of the Georgia roster. It's going to happen at 3 p.m. today on the DawgNation video channels. We could actually have some surprises on this show coming up here pretty soon too. But for now, just assume it's 3 p.m. today on this Friday. DawgNation video channels, very quick. Great breakdown of Jordan Davis from John Stinchcomb. That comes up today, 3 p.m. on the DawgNation video channels, and we'll do it every Friday through the month of spring. Not the month of spring, the spring season, month of March heading into April. So that's going to be really fun. Now, there's also this. Coming up on Monday's show, I'm going to make another announcement. And this one is a long time in the making. It's something I'm really, really excited about. If you listened to the podcast yesterday on the podcast cool down, I did give them a little bit of a preview for this. For the folks who have been with us in the podcast for a long time, trying to do some things for them as a way of saying thanks for their long time support of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And I dropped this announcement to them on the podcast yesterday. But on Monday's show, I'm going to say something that I have been hoping to say for a long time. I get a chance to say it on Monday. This is going to be really cool, really fun. For those of you who've been with us for a number of years, this may really mean something to you when we say it. So we'll tell you about that here coming up on Monday, so stay tuned for all of that. Now, let's do SEC through here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. And for the most part, I'm going to stay fixated on the start of the NCAA tournament. I'm a big fan of this event. I watched the first four last night. And I tell you, I'll be the last one to say this because everybody else in media already has, but it is true. It is just so great to have this event back after not having it a year ago, and so much fun. UCLA, Michigan State was a great game last night. There were a lot of really good games amongst that first four from last night, and all happens again today. Couple hours from now, about an hour or so from now from when I'm doing this, you see Florida going in the early stages. By the way, for those of you that got signed up for our bracket contest there, we did this at ESPN.com. This is not an official DawgNation promotion. There are no sponsors for it or anything. We're just doing this for fun. But for those of you that got signed up, appreciate you doing that. If you're watching live, you still have a little bit of time to do this before first tip. It's DawgNation UGA. Just search that at ESPN.com. And you can be a part of our bracket contest. Once again, we're just still doing this for fun, but you can be a part of that. We do have SEC teams first out the block today when it comes to the tournament. Virginia Tech, Florida, the 10-7 matchup. That's a 12-15 game. It's probably not a surprise to you that I don't have Florida advancing here. This is strictly speaking a emotional pick. I don't want Florida to win, so therefore I picked against them. I do think it's kind of interesting, 12:45. I think we mentioned this a little earlier. There's a lot of love out there for Colgate right now against Arkansas in the 14-3 matchup. That's the second game out of the blocks today on True TV. Good to have True TV back in our lives, by the way. I think that's interesting. I don't really know. I mean, Colgate has kind of been a darling of the analytics community a little bit this season, but a lot of that's on the basis of not playing very many games. so maybe worth paying attention to. You kind of roll through here, 4 p.m. today, Georgia Tech back in the tournament. But bad news, they get ready to take on Loyola Chicago, team that was in the Final Four a couple of years ago. Mose is right, the ACC Player of the Year has contracted the coronavirus, and he is not with Tech for this game. So I don't know if Sister Jean called in a favor or what, but in this particular case, Georgia Tech will not have its ACC Player of the Year. They were already a point spread underdog against Loyola as it was, but as it stands right now, Tech now even bigger underdog against Loyola. Boy, easy for me to say. So Tech not exactly enjoying their first trip back to the NCAA tournament in a long time. By the way, if Loyola wins there, they'll get a 1-8 matchup against their in-state, I'll use air quotes here, rival Illinois in round 2. So kind of interesting to think about. Tennessee goes at 4:30 against Oregon State. Oregon State was one of the bid stealers there. This should actually be a fairly easy advance for Tennessee, even though we typically think of 12s over 5s. I'm not quite so sure that's going to be the case there with the Vols. Anything else worth paying attention to? I kind of like Syracuse in the 11-6 against San Diego State tonight. That's a 9:40 tip there. And I do like West Virginia a lot in this tournament here this weekend, possibly making a run. Bob Huggins, always a tough outcome in NCAA tournament time. That's kind of my thought on that. And, of course, don't forget, Monday at noon, it's the ladies NCAA tournament that gets going, and the Lady Dogs against Drexel, the Dragons. As I said last night on Cover 4 Live, some Dragons we like. Shout out to Malachi Starks over at Jefferson High School. Some Dragons we don't. Drexel, an example of that on Monday. But good luck to the Lady Dogs. And don't forget, Joni Taylor, the reigning SEC Coach of the Year, was with us on DawgNation Daily a little earlier this week to preview all of that. That was certainly a fun thing to be able to do. We'll make that your SEC through and wrap things up here today. And, of course, as I've been doing now for a while, we've been dealing with some video challenges, just kind of a new landscape. Big Tech's always trying to, put new obstacles in front of you. Many of you have complained about that. Some of you complained about the top badge being taken away from you for those of you that like to watch on Facebook. And some of you more significantly and seriously have said, hey, I used to get notifications, now I don't get them. Well, one of the best ways to get those notifications, to make sure you can be aware every time we come on the air live, is to become a DawgNation YouTube subscriber. And for those of you that continue to do that, subscribing to DawgNation on YouTube, we certainly appreciate that. Hopefully it helps you because when we're going on the air, but gaining those YouTube subscribers certainly helps us. We appreciate that. We'll make you a golden shoe winner today for your continued support of DawgNation. Of course, hit me up on Twitter at DawgNation Daily, and you can be a part of our Gator Hater roll call. By the way, speaking of the Gator Haters, Gator Hater Countdown, 225 days. We think Georgia gets a win over Florida. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Appreciate all of you being with us here today. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's one of the reasons why on this program we love recommending R.S. Andrews and invite you to check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, we'll get a few of your comments here. We are going to be quick today because we do have the second show, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to be fairly quick with all this today, but we'll give you a chance to have your voice heard on both Facebook and YouTube. I think I did YouTube first yesterday, so I'll do Facebook first today. We'll take a few comments, then we'll bounce over there after that. Neil Calvino giving us a glory to old Georgia. You love to see that. Philip Jordan Wells shouting at the state of Louisiana. Kent Caldwell says, I used to love the Final Four, but with the one and done and the chunk and dunk, it's boring. Yeah, to me, listen, I'll certainly say college basketball is not the kind of sport it used to be when I was younger. 80s and 90s, you had these players that you recognized for 3, in some cases 4 years. You did develop that relationship with the sport that you probably don't have now. But, really, if it's the one and done stuff that you don't like, I mean, the one and done stuff is not a huge part of the NCAA tournament. Go back and look at the last Final Four we had. Those were not freshman-dominated teams that played in that Final Four. Those were experienced, seasoned teams. Zion Williamson, Duke going on early, as a for instance. Kentucky, a non-factor in the Final Four for a number of years now. So I can understand a little bit of frustration with the one-and-done stuff and what you may think that's doing to college basketball. But the truth is when you really get to the heart and the meat of the NCAA tournament, that's not really a one-and-done event. Experience still matters for teams that win at the college level. Let's see what else. Isaac Cruz says we have a date and time yet for the spring game. We do now. It's April 17th, and it's going to be 2 p.m., and it's going to be on SEC Network Plus, so streaming video for that. Tennille Calvino, boy, sunburn yesterday, now sore from playing golf. I'm telling you, Tennille lives it up. I think that Tennille's given Matt Rukavina a run for his money. Matt's always, globetrotting, world traveler, living this sort of blue blood lifestyle. I believe Tennille Calvino is giving Matt a run for his money for sure. Chris Lynn White says, I believe that's I-77 getting on my nerves. Where is I-77? Brandon Griffin says, I love seeing my Bama friends pretend they love basketball now. Yeah, it is kind of funny. It is. And I definitely am rooting for Bama to have an early exit here. I think there's a chance they might. I think I said this in the regular show this week. These teams that are heavily reliant on the three, listen, there's a chance they stay hot throughout the entire tournament. Bama's clearly, had big games, obviously just absolutely walloped Georgia at Coleman Coliseum. But there's also a chance that there's a little regression back to the mean for some of these big shooting teams. Live by the three, die by the three. You've heard that said before. I think if you're looking to go against the grain with your pick, and the larger the bracket pool you're in, the more you should have some contrarian picks. I think picking against Alabama is actually a fairly interesting contrarian pick, even though they're clearly one of the potential Final Four candidates. John Cooksey says I-77's there in Charlotte. By the way, speaking of that, we could have some fun news about a big trip to Charlotte here coming up pretty soon. I can't say much more about that now, but just stay tuned for that. That's not my Monday announcement, but it is going to be fun. Matt Rukavina says, any chance we could wish my wife a happy birthday today? She's the real reason that I live the jet set lifestyle. Yes, Matt, to your lovely wife, we do say happy birthday and hope both of you get a chance to celebrate that in style and have a great weekend. Certainly appreciate you tuning in on a special day for your family, and a happy birthday to Mrs. Rukavina for sure. There's a DawgNation link there to the tournament bracket challenge that's pinned at the top of the Facebook page, so y'all join that if you want to. We'd love to have you involved in that. Like I said, it's mostly just for fun. I think our people are tired of mailing out T-shirts and stuff like that. That's a little bit of a hassle. Some of you won a T-shirt on this show a couple years ago, and you still never got it. So I apologize for that. But we'll certainly give you a bucket full of pride if you can walk away the winner on this one. Santiago Diarn, good to see him checking in, wishing a happy birthday. Randy Hall says we need a Marlowe's event in Charlotte. That'd be fun. One way or another, I think you may be hearing a little bit about Charlotte. I think you may be hearing a little bit about that. So I'll just say this real quick. So in talking about, Charlotte and that kind of stuff, I'd kind of wanted, I should probably save this and do this some other time, but so when I think about Charlotte, here's what I think about. I think about NASCAR. NASCAR Hall of Fame is there, two big races, All-Star race, Coca-Cola 600. I think about Charlotte being a NASCAR town. And so I wanted to do a NASCAR-style T-shirt for Charlotte with a DawgNation race car, number 21 for the year, and then, kind of checkered flag type thing, and just kind of make a race car-style T-shirt around the Charlotte stuff. Not saying that anything's going to happen. Obviously, right now, we're still in a pandemic world, but just in the event that something could happen, I wanted to do that. And other people are telling me that people wouldn't really get that not everybody thinks of Charlotte as a NASCAR town. So that was kind of my idea for kind of a fun thing to do related to the upcoming trip to Charlotte, and a trip that I hope DawgNation gets to take together, but I may not get my way on that. Let me get back. I looked over at YouTube for a second. I was like, I've seen these comments before. This was I had the cover for from last night pulled up. Here's today's show. G. Grace Bama Boy in here stirring trouble up as per usual. Wouldn't expect anything different. Brandon Griffin, I think, doing double duty in the comment sections here. Because I used to live in Bama, so I can talk about it. I was 6, had no choice. Got out when I turned 8, was able to get a job to buy a bus ticket. That's a funny comment. And I think that Brandon's doing double duty here. Let's see what else. Over here on the YouTube side of things. Corey Doyle says Bears fans must feel like Tennessee fans. Horrible decision making. I guess not happy with the Andy Dalton acquisition there by the Chicago Bears. VTW going back and forth with Jordan Bowman over here. Light Dog 1968 says never jealous of Bama. I would agree with that. Sir Man says I think Georgia will have a great year this coming football season. The offense is lethal now. Boy, I'm looking forward to that. Matthew McGahee checking back in. Great to see Matthew here today. That's nice to see. Matthew, I'm really happy that you're here. Mark Abe says Chubb is good. Henry is superhuman. Listen, I'm as big a Derrick Henry fan as there is, but Chubb is more than good. I'm as big a Henry fan. I love to watch Derrick Henry play. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the entire NFL just because he's doing things that, you typically don't think of. But I would say that while I'm totally with you that Derrick Henry is a rare performer in the SEC in the NFL, I think you're not quite giving Chubb enough credit there. Let's see what else. Croking 123 says, when it comes to tournament success, get yourself a veteran that's fighting for their basketball lives. Yeah, I mean, the other thing, too, is, these younger players, they just will make mistakes. In addition to the motivation that a senior player has or an older player has to stay in the tournament, they're also just less likely to make mistakes. I mean, these younger guys, for all the talent they do have a tendency to falter in late game situations. You do not see the big freshmen, doing big things in last NCAA tournament, nor in a lot of these NCAA tournaments. It's just something to keep in mind. I mean, when was the last time Kentucky made a Final Four run with all the great freshmen that they have? This is still a veteran player sport. I mean, Bruce Pearl's Auburn team that made the Final Four is the perfect example of this. Less NBA talent than what Kentucky has, but more veteran talent, back during the 2019 season, and they're the one from the SEC that makes the Final Four run. And, Crow King mentions Kentucky. You're exactly right about that. Let's see what else is going on here. John Hendrick says Nick Chubb's made the Pro Bowl 2 out of 3 seasons. Yeah, I absolutely believe that Nick Chubb is doing just fine in his NFL career, for sure. Schuler Thomas has got Oral Roberts over Ohio State. So I've heard some good things about Oral Roberts. Obviously, typically an up-tempo style team. I'm assuming that's still true for them right now. I do have Ohio State making a really deep run, not because I necessarily believe in the Buckeyes, just because you got to have somebody making a deep run. So my big upset is also a mid-major against a Big Ten team. I do have Grand Canyon taking down Iowa. I'm not a fan of Fran McCaffrey, the Iowa coach. I have not heard a lot of Oral Roberts over Ohio State, but obviously bold predictions like that's how you win a bracket contest. You just need for it to come true. West Georgia fan says the Vols will eat McDonald's after their game. That's pretty funny. Bounce back over. A lot of YouTube comments today. Let me bounce back over to Facebook here just for a moment, though. Dwight Sharp checking in to give you go dogs. Appreciate that. John Cooksey doing the same thing. Lucy Bowers Boykin says 1 down, 2 to go. We can do this. I wonder what she's referencing there. But anyway, Bruckus Mills checking in to say happy birthday. That's great to see. A lot of folks showing some love to the Rook Venus here. That's always a very nice thing. Jermaine King brings up a really, really good point. He says the NCAA tournament means eating chicken wings all weekend. There's nothing better to do than that. Get yourself a big plate of wings, favorite beverage, and tune in to watch some basketball. That's good times. That is good times. Even now, with me following the sport a little less closely than I once did, that's still good times all the way around. So I'm glad you're getting ready to have some fun doing all that too. Glad you are. All right, 1 or 2 more comments. We're gonna get ready to bounce out of here after the weekend. After that, I hope all of you are getting ready for some fun, doing some good things. Hopefully, wherever you are, the weather ends up being fairly nice. Steve Island says for recruiting, we need to win a national championship this season. I think that Steve is partially right about that at a certain point in time, you're striving to put your recruiting, I don't want to say on autopilot because that misunderstands the challenge that's involved there. But obviously, at a certain point, you want to sell the results. It just becomes the kind of gold standard that you're looking to strive towards. And Georgia's done everything, I would say, but win that national championship. And obviously, by getting that done, you unlock the next level of recruiting. And I think, listen, anytime somebody makes a decision, and this is true if you're buying a car or if you're picking a school, whatever else, you're not really choosing something. You're disqualifying other choices. You've heard it said before that you have suicide, homicide, and decide's kind of the same thing. You're killing off all the other options. You're choosing to disqualify the other options. And I think in the college football recruiting world, as a big-time power, what you want to do is be hard to be killed off as an option, not easily disqualified. And, Alabama obviously leaned on its prestige in this past recruiting class because they couldn't host visitors, things like that, and it really worked. Maybe one of the greatest class of all time, maybe the greatest class of all time. So when Georgia checks off that national championship box, eventually I believe they will, but when they do, it just makes Georgia hard to negative recruit against. Because, listen, coaches don't want to admit this, but a huge part of what goes on in recruiting is negative recruiting. Same thing as politics. I mean, it's like every politician wants you to believe that they're, out there selling some positive message, but you watch TV, the commercials are filled with negative messages because negative messages work. Negative recruiting also works as well. Plant that seed of doubt about why you don't want to go to certain school. And when Georgia wins the championship, when it starts producing the kinds of first-round picks that lead to championships, all of a sudden that just becomes way, way easier to do. I think you're right about that. And back on YouTube here quickly before we say goodbye, for our final YouTube comment, John Adams mentioning Andrew Thomas making $21 million in year one. That top 10 NFL draft is a gold standard. Sony and Nick, year three, bank is around $9 million each. Nick will get that big contract soon. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. A lot of these, Georgia guys really getting themselves paid for sure. Brandon Griffin says 2020s will be the decade of the Dogs. It's our time, and we have all the pieces. Brandon, boy, that sounds great. I can't wait to see that all play out. That certainly sounds like a lot of fun. Jay Shipes predicts Ole Miss to be Bama this year. Boy, that's something. SEC Dog says, as a Georgia fan, I can't relate to having a losing record to Auburn this century. That's pretty funny stuff. That's pretty good stuff by SEC Dog there. Alan Berry says, I don't mind when Georgia wins the championship. They deserve it. Well, Alan, it's great to have you checking in here today. Mike D says, I need a bracket win to go with my DawgNation mask I won a while back. Yeah, that's good, Mike. I hope that you do well in that. I'm glad that you won one of those DawgNation masks. Still have some of those. Hopefully we don't need them much longer, but for now, I'm glad to know that I still got some of those around. I'm glad to know you're enjoying yours. SEC Dog coming hard in the comment section here. Jordan Bowman says, as a Clemson fan, I can't relate to having a losing record to Auburn this century either. Yeah, I guess Clemson, took them down 2 years in a row, a couple of years ago. Is that right? 2 years in a row? John Hendrick says, G ain't holding back today. Yeah, I think G has fully embraced his status as the villain in the comment section. I think he likes being the wrestling heel over there, and I think most of y'all kind of have a good time with that too. So I'm glad you're all enjoying yourselves, and we appreciate all of you being here for it here today. I'll also remind you to check out as we get ready to say goodbye here. All the Atlanta news now going on at AJC.com. Obviously, as you head towards the weekend, there's a lot of fun stuff to think about the AJC. Busy weekend around Atlanta each and every week. And to kind of get up to date on what you can be involved with in the Atlanta area this weekend, check out your weekend preview with all of that. Also, it looks like Vice President Harris on her way to Atlanta for a visit here today, too. You can find out about that. And if you want to hear more about Tech in the NCAA tournament without Moses Wright, what that means for their chances against Loyola of Chicago, what that means for the point spread in that game, you can read that there at AJC.com. Also, NASCAR Cup Series in Atlanta on Sunday. You got the truck race and the Xfinity Series on Saturday. So busy weekend there at Atlanta Motor Speedway there too. So all of that, great coverage. Atlanta News Now at AJC.com. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Make sure you check them out online at rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust them to do all of that for you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Find them online at rsandrews.com. And DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. We'll see you 10 a.m. Monday, everybody. Have a great weekend.